There comes a time in life when everything feels like it's collapsing. The plans you made crumble. The trust you gave is betrayed. The strength you once held onto slips right through your fingers, and you're left there silent, broken, questioning how something so whole could become so shattered. But even in that darkness, even when your heart was heavy and your hope was gone, you didn't let that moment define you. That pain, it didn't break you permanently, it refined you. You see, most people run from pain, they numb it. They avoid it, they hide behind distractions because the truth is, pain forces you to face yourself. And that's terrifying, but not you. You sat in the pain, you faced the silence. You stood in front of the mirror and looked into the eyes of someone who had been through the fire and refused to stay burned. You understood something powerful. The very thing that tried to destroy you was also trying to reveal you. It's easy to be strong when life is easy. It's easy to stay positive when things are going your way. But what happens when life hits back? When the people you loved walk away? When the doors you knocked on stay closed? That's when true strength shows up, and that's exactly what happened to you. Life tried to reduce you to pieces, but instead of falling apart, you started piecing yourself back together. Slower this time, with more intention, with more honesty, and with more resilience. Because when everything was stripped away, your title, your relationships, your confidence, you realized what was left was real. The core of who you are, the fighter, the survivor, the version of you that doesn't need applause or approval to keep going. That's the version of you the world tried to break but couldn't. It wasn't overnight. Healing never is. There were days you doubted yourself, nights you cried silently into your pillow, moments where it felt easier to give up. But something deeper than fear kept you moving, something louder than doubt kept whispering, not yet, because even in your pain you knew this wasn't the end of your story. Pain became your teacher. It taught you patience. It taught you that not everyone is meant to stay, and not every loss is meant to be replaced. It taught you that sometimes being alone isn't loneliness, it's clarity, it's strength. It's the space where you hear your own voice again after years of letting the world drown it out. And somewhere along the way, you stopped wishing for the old you to return, because the old you wouldn't have survived what you went through. The old you tolerated more than you deserved, believed lies instead of truths, and gave pieces of your soul to people who never knew what to do with them. But not anymore. Now you walk with a different kind of strength, a quiet one, a grounded one. You no longer need to prove your worth. You've lived through too much for that. You no longer chase validation. You've become your own source. The fire that once threatened to consume you is now the very thing that fuels your purpose. And while the world sees scars, you see survival, you see growth, you see victory. You were broken, but that wasn't your ending. That was your beginning, because sometimes being broken is the only way to become unshakable. You no longer fear the fall. You've already been to the bottom, and it didn't destroy you, it built you, and today you don't just walk forward, you rise. Stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next. You know what rock bottom feels like, not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, spiritually. It's the moment when everything inside you feels empty. You can't breathe the same. You wake up, but it doesn't feel like living. The days blur, the nights are heavy, and the weight on your chest doesn't go away. That's what rock bottom is. It's not just a moment, it's a place where you feel forgotten by the world and almost forgotten by yourself. But here's the truth the world won't tell you. Rock bottom isn't the end. For you, it became the beginning. Because while everything above you fell apart, something beneath you held firm. Your will to rise, you didn't see it at first. No one does. You were too deep in the pain, too surrounded by silence, too far removed from who you used to be. But over time, you realized something that changed everything. If you're at the bottom, there's nowhere left to fall. That means the only direction left is up. And you didn't climb out all at once. No, that climb was brutal. It was slow. Some days you slipped back down. Some days you didn't have the strength to try. But even on the days you moved an inch, you were moving forward. That mattered. Every single small step mattered, because it wasn't just about getting out. It was about building something while you were down there. Rock bottom became your foundation, and when you think about it now, maybe it had to happen that way. Maybe you needed to be stripped of what wasn't truly you, the fake relationships, the shallow goals. The noise, because it's hard to see what's real when life is full of distractions, but down there, in the silence, you started to hear your own voice again. You began asking yourself better questions. Who am I without the title, without the validation, without the applause? And even though the answers didn't come right away, the asking changed you. You started to become someone who doesn't just rebuild for the world, but for yourself. And when people ask how you made it through, you don't have a perfect answer. You just know you did. You showed up to your own life even when it hurt. You got tired of feeling stuck, tired of the shame, tired of pretending. And you decided that broken didn't have to mean defeated. There's a strength that only comes from the bottom. It's a different kind of strength, quiet, humble, unshakable. Because when you've been at your lowest, you lose the fear of falling again. You stop living for approval and start living with intention. You stop chasing perfection and start honoring progress. You stop faking smiles and start finding your real joy again. And no one else might have seen the work you did down there. But you did. You fought for your own mind. You challenged your own habits. You forgave people who never apologized. And most importantly, you forgave yourself for breaking, for struggling, for not knowing better. That kind of healing, that's powerful. So yes, you were broken. Yes, you hit the bottom. But that's not where your story ends. Because you didn't just get back up, you rebuilt stronger, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. That version of you at rock bottom had every excuse to quit, but didn't, and now everything you're becoming is rooted in that moment. That fight, that decision to keep going when you had every reason not to, you didn't just survive rock bottom. You turned it into your foundation, and from there, you started building the life you were meant to live. One choice, one step, one piece at a time. There was a time when the weight of it all made you ask, why me? You didn't say it loudly. You whispered it, maybe through tears or in the silence of your own thoughts. Why did life feel so unfair? Why did everything seem to fall apart just when you were trying your best to hold it all together? You searched for answers. You waited for signs. You hoped something, someone, would explain the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss. But the answers never came the way you expected. What came instead was something deeper, a realization that changed your entire mindset. You stopped asking, why me? And you started saying, try me. That shift wasn't sudden. It came in layers. First, you got tired of being tired. Then you got tired of feeling powerless. And somewhere in between holding on and letting go, you found something inside yourself that refused to surrender. That fire, that inner voice, that strength that said, I'm not done yet. See, the victim mindset is easy to fall into when everything feels out of your control. And for a while, maybe you lived in that space, feeling helpless, hopeless, like life was just happening to you. But you didn't stay there. You couldn't, because something inside you knew there had to be more than just surviving pain. There had to be a way to use it, to rise from it, to come out on the other side of it not just alive, but transformed. And you did that. You stood up in the middle of your mess and decided that being broken didn't mean being finished. You stopped waiting for the world to hand you a different set of circumstances. You started owning the ones you had, not because they were fair, but because they were yours. And that's when everything began to change. You became the kind of person who doesn't flinch when things get hard, who doesn't beg the world to be easy, because you've already learned how to be stronger. You faced your reality, accepted your scars, and turned your wounds into wisdom. And with each challenge, instead of shrinking, you stood taller. You stopped running and started facing what needed to be faced. And yes, people might have underestimated you. They might have walked away, doubted you, written you off. But what they didn't see was the inner transformation taking place. The quiet decision you made to no longer see yourself as powerless. The shift in energy that happens when someone stops asking for mercy and starts preparing for battle. That mindset, try me, doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from pain, from rising when you had every reason to stay down. You stopped letting fear lead. You stopped replaying every failure in your head. You realized that strength isn't found in avoiding struggle. It's found in standing inside of it and saying, "This will not break me." And when you made that mental shift, everything followed. Your focus changed, your energy changed, your presence changed. You started walking into rooms differently. You weren't looking for permission anymore. You weren't seeking validation. You knew your story, every painful chapter, and you owned it. Because your past didn't disqualify you. It prepared you, and from that place you started building. Building better boundaries, building clearer goals, building a deeper relationship with yourself. You no longer feared rejection because you knew your value wasn't negotiable. You no longer let people treat you like you were disposable because you finally saw how irreplaceable your strength really was. You became dangerous in the best way possible because you didn't need anything from anyone to keep going. You found your fuel in the very fire that once threatened to consume you. So when life comes again with its storms, and it will, you won't be the one asking, "Why me?" anymore. You'll be the one who stands up, steady and unshaken, and says, "Try me." Because you've already proven it, you're not here to be broken. You're here to rise when life breaks you, when the people you trusted disappoint you, and when everything feels like it's slipping through your hands. Bitterness becomes an easy place to hide. It's tempting to sit in the pain and let it turn into anger, to build walls, to stop trusting, to carry that betrayal like armor. And for a while, maybe you did. Maybe you held onto the hurt because it felt safer than risking being hurt again. But deep down, something in you knew bitterness wouldn't heal you. It would only bury you. So you chose something harder. You chose growth. That decision didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet, difficult moments when you had to sit with yourself and be honest about what you were carrying. The resentment, the pain, the parts of you that wanted to stay angry because anger felt powerful. But you realized something: life, changing, holding onto bitterness didn't make you strong. It made you stuck. Growth asked you to do what bitterness never would. It asked you to let go, to stop replaying every conversation, every betrayal, every wrong done to you. Not because they didn't hurt, not because they didn't matter, but because you were ready to stop letting them control you. You were ready to take your power back. And taking your power back meant forgiveness, not for them, but for you. Because forgiveness isn't saying what you did was okay. It's saying, I'm no longer letting what you did live rent-free in my mind. It's closing the door on a chapter that's been bleeding into every new one. That's the kind of strength most people don't talk about, the kind that doesn't scream, but quietly decides, I'm moving forward anyway. Growth meant taking accountability, too. Not for what broke you, but for how you chose to rise from it. It meant asking yourself hard questions. How am I showing up in my own life? What am I still clinging to that's keeping me from peace? It wasn't about blaming yourself, it was about reclaiming control. Because the moment you chose growth over bitterness, you gave yourself something the past could never offer: freedom. Freedom to become someone new, to rebuild with intention, to let the pain make you better, not bitter. And it showed, not always on the outside, but inside, in the way you started responding instead of reacting. In the way you became more selective with your energy, more protective of your peace. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never cared to understand you. You stopped shrinking for the comfort of others. You stopped trying to prove your worth to people who didn't even value their own. You chose peace over pettiness, healing over hostility, and in doing so, you grew into someone even you didn't expect. A version of yourself that looks back not with hatred, but with pride. Not because you didn't get hurt, but because you didn't let the hurt change your heart. Bitterness would have made you cold. Growth made you wise, and yes, it's still hard sometimes. There are still moments when the old pain tries to pull you back. When a song, a memory, a message tries to open an old wound. But now you breathe. You remind yourself who you've become, and you respond from a place of power, not pain. Because your strength isn't loud, it doesn't seek revenge or try to prove a point. It doesn't need recognition. Your strength is silent. It's in your presence. It's in your peace. It's in the way you continue to rise without resentment in your heart. You chose growth, and that choice changed everything. There comes a moment in everyone's life when you're forced to realize something that shakes you to your core. No one is coming to save you. Not your friends, not your family, not the people you once bent over backward for. No one is going to swoop in, fix everything, and make the pain go away. In that realization, it hurts. It breaks the illusion that help is always around the corner. It confronts you with the truth that sometimes it's just you, alone in the fight. At first, that thought is terrifying. You feel abandoned, exposed, like the weight of everything is too heavy for one person to carry. You start to wonder if you're even strong enough to face it alone. You question everything: your strength, your worth, your future. And in that storm of doubt, you almost give in, almost, but then something shifts. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's quiet, like a whisper from deep inside you, a voice that says, "No one is coming, but you're still here." And that moment, that simple awareness, begins to change everything. You realize that maybe it was never about someone else saving you. Maybe it was always about you discovering the power that's been there all along. Maybe life had to break you to show you what you're really made of, because when you're left with nothing, when there's no one left to lean on, you find your own spine. You find your own voice. You become your own rescue. And that's exactly what you did. You stopped waiting for someone to fix what you were feeling. You stopped hoping that someone else would understand your pain deeply enough to pull you out of it. You started standing on your own, even if your legs were shaking. You looked in the mirror and realized that the only person who truly had the power to change your life was you. So you got up, slowly, with trembling hands, with a heart still bruised from the past, but you got up anyway. You started doing the hard things, setting boundaries, saying no, cutting off people who drained you, facing your fears instead of avoiding them. You began showing up for yourself in ways no one else ever had. You became your own protector, your own motivator, your own safe space, and it wasn't easy. There were nights when the silence screamed louder than the noise ever did, days when your confidence crumbled, and all you could do was hold yourself together moment by moment. But each time you got back up, something grew inside you: self-respect. Not the kind that depends on how others see you, but the kind that comes from showing up for yourself over and over again, even when it's hard. You stopped living in survival mode. You stopped waiting for someone to love you enough to make you feel whole. Because now you know wholeness comes from within. You're not incomplete. You were never broken beyond repair. You were just waiting on someone else to give you what only you could give yourself. And now you walk differently. You don't need permission to speak. You don't shrink to make others comfortable. You don't settle for half love, half effort, or half truths. You've become solid in who you are, not because someone told you you're enough, but because you proved it to yourself. You're no longer looking for a savior. You became your own. There was a time when all anyone could see was your pain. It showed in your eyes, in your silence, in the way your shoulders slumped like the weight of the world had taken up permanent residence. You were barely holding it together, and the truth is you weren't sure you could. You broke quietly and completely. You cried when no one was looking. You wore a smile like armor, just to make it through the day. But deep inside, you were falling apart. You were in the middle of your breakdown, and no one knew how bad it really was. But even in that place, even when you couldn't see the way forward, you didn't stay there. Something inside you kept going, not because it was easy, not because you had it all figured out, but because deep down, even when you felt defeated, you still had a spark. A quiet refusal to let your story end in that dark place, and so you fought. You didn't announce it. You didn't post it. You just started showing up differently. You started rebuilding from the inside out. Piece by piece, breath by breath. You started doing the small things that didn't feel like much at the time, getting out of bed when you didn't want to, speaking kindly to yourself even when your thoughts were loud and cruel, saying no when your people, pleasing instincts screamed yes. You started taking your life back, moment by moment. People saw the struggle, they heard your pain, but what they didn't expect, what no one was prepared for, was your comeback. Because when you returned, you came back changed. You weren't the same person who broke. You were wiser now. Sharper, you moved with purpose. You spoke with clarity. You no longer sought validation from the world because you had found something far more valuable: self-respect. Your comeback wasn't loud. It didn't require attention or applause, but it was undeniable. It was in the way you started setting boundaries with confidence, not guilt. It was in the way you carried yourself, not like someone who had been through hell, but like someone who walked through fire and came out gold. And maybe people didn't notice it at first. Maybe they still looked at you and saw the old version of who you used to be. But over time, your energy shifted, your decisions changed, your standards rose, and eventually, even those who once doubted you had to admit, you weren't the same. Because you didn't just recover, you rose, you turned your breakdown into a breakthrough. You took the pain that nearly destroyed you and made it your power. You used every ounce of struggle as fuel, not to get revenge, but to get better. And now, you don't walk into rooms needing to be seen. You are seen. Your strength speaks before you do. Your presence carries the weight of everything you've survived. And when people ask what happened, how you became this version of yourself, they don't always understand the answer. Because your journey wasn't pretty, it wasn't linear, it wasn't clean, it was messy, it was raw, it was built in the dark, where no one clapped for you, where no one cheered you on. But you showed up for yourself anyway. That's what a real comeback looks like. It's not about being louder. It's about being deeper, more grounded, more certain of who you are. And you got there not because life was kind, but because you were relentless. You refused to stay broken. You refused to settle. You refused to let that version of you be your final chapter. Now, when people talk about you, they don't just remember what happened to you. They remember how you rose from it. Stronger, smarter, more powerful than ever, because your comeback, it's louder than your breakdown ever was.